We have the sound booms, we have the film crew, we have my cell phone, we have the tripod. But anyway, hello everybody. Welcome to the channel, back to the channel, which is still about furniture from the past and shedding a little bit of light on this mysterious subject, but namely sharing the most compelling examples of it that I find with you, such as this pre-industrial, circa 1795 cylindrical desk from Paris. And now I do hope that you'll enjoy taking a closer look at all of these items, but the overarching goal is really to shed some light on the subject so that we can see the difference between original, generally pre-1840 period pieces from this time when furniture was most readily made as an art and everything else that we ambiguously qualify as an antique. And so firstly, with this desk, we are dealing with a work of veneer art with a complicated oak frame over which very interesting veneers of acajou moiré, as it's called in French, or shimmering mahogany, have been glued. And this differs from flame mahogany or mottled mahogany, but it's this curious variety here with these flowing striations that I think remain just as attractive now as they were in the 1790s. And so this is just a first distinction or first qualification that we can begin to make in categorizing and in apprehending what this is, as these works of veneer art, typically associated with a more urban, formal Parisian production, really differ from these larger regional case pieces made out of solid wood that I've featured elsewhere on the channel. But comparing these two varieties of furniture is a bit like comparing apples and oranges. But nevertheless, that's the first thing we can say about this piece, is that it's a work of veneer art, a meuble d'ébénisterie. But anyway, the real star of the show is the contrast between this mahogany and all of the brass ornamentation. And although this piece might appear a little traditional to us now, it's important to remember that during the 1790s, this was very contemporary. This was a very avant-garde, sort of a bedazzling and surprising thing to own. And also, to corroborate my claim that this piece is worth a bit of our time, I will say that it's identical to several which are conserved in the French Ministry of Culture's National Furniture Reserve, Mobilier National. In fact, it's equivalent to one which is in terrible condition, reminding us that even a wrecked period piece is considerably interesting. And so, the 1790s is actually the time of the French Revolution. And we see here with a desk like this, essentially a Louis XVI period desk, which has been adorned with all of this brass, we see how certain styles, before they are eclipsed with new styles, will often be enhanced to reflect a change in the times. So that's why we call this a late Louis XVI period cylindrical desk, as an original Louis XVI period desk would have basically been the exact same thing, but without all of the brass. And they did make this brass adorned variant a little bit earlier than the 1790s, but it's generally right about the time of the Revolution that we start seeing these plaques of brass replacing zones that would otherwise be fluted. And so, this particular desk is topped with a white Carrara marble, which itself is surrounded by a brass gallery. Now, on these period galleries, we're going to see that they are soldered together every 10 inches, and we're also going to appreciate some irregularities about them, which is pretty typical of this pre-industrial furniture. And then if we move down, we're going to see that the legs are fluted and tapered, and that they end in little brass hooves. Now, when you move a desk like this, it's important to tape the hooves because the wood of the legs around which they have been wedged, well, the wood has shrunk, and so quite often when you lift one of these pieces up, you'll leave a hoof behind. I think we can all agree that that would be very expensive and very boring to have to replace. But somehow this one retains its 4 hooves. And if we move up to the side of the piece, we're going to see that it too is finished and decorated with some semi-cylindrical fillets of brass that frame the main panel shapes, and with some plaques of brass as well. Now, if we look behind this piece, we're going to see that it is actually finished and very elegantly paneled as well, which makes this piece a meuble de milieu, meaning that it's finished on all sides. It's a middle-of-the-room piece, which is appropriate for use elsewhere than, say, up against a wall. Now, in line with this added touch of quality, the back being finished, if we take a look at the locks here, we're going to see that they are sophisticated trefoil mechanisms with a clover or a club shape around which the column of the key must fit to work the locks. And so this is just a high-quality lock that we're going to see on luxury domestic furniture typically made in Paris during the last quarter of the 18th century and the first half of the 19th century. Now, if we open these drawers, we're actually going to see that they are made of oak, We'll also take a note the dovetailing that's joining them together. We're also going to see the relative thickness of the veneers here, which were made in this pre-industrial era. As time moves on, tools and techniques will allow them to make thinner and more regular veneers, which are almost paper thin. Now, the drawers here in front are actually, well, there's two over there. There's one in the center, as you can see. And let's just take a look at how 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 trefoil locks on this piece. So the drawers here in the front actually simulate 2 drawers, but in fact this is 1 drawer, a very deep one, which is common to find on this type of furniture. And if we move along the front of the piece, we're actually going to see that this traverse is sagging a little bit, showing the subtle effects of gravity over the last 226 years. And so, you know, that's perhaps something that would annoy the modern eye, but if we think about it, it's a subtle and very reassuring sign of period authenticity that this piece has in fact been standing here just like this for several centuries. And now underneath the piece we're actually going to see some of the sophisticated joinery that holds this together. That should interest the furniture makers among us. And we're just going to see the real technical mastery of this craft that's going on beneath the very artistic exterior of this desk. And now finally, of course, this writing surface, this cylindrical quarter-cylinder writing surface, is going to roll backwards inside of the desk, guided by a brass rail inside that allows it to fall back into this rectangular shape, which gives the desk the appearance of being rectangular. But in fact, if we look at the side here, we can see that the top portion is really just perfectly formed such that there's a half cylinder contained in the front of the cylinder here and in the back here within this gradin. Now, I will admit that the roll top doesn't open very well, but welcome to the world of 225-year-old roll top desks. Now, once she's open, and she's open, let's try to refrain from doing that too often, but we see that we actually have 2 rows of drawers, with the top drawers being shorter and shallower than the bottom drawers because, of course, they are narrower. They're tucked up into the upper part of that cylinder relative to the bottom ones. So these are rather short little drawers. These are about 2 times as long. And then the writing surface here extends, but it is, in fact, simulating a 3rd row of drawers. These are, in fact, dummy drawers. There's nothing behind them, but they give us a nice impression that there are 3 rows of drawers inside. And now the bottom drawer, which appears to be a middle drawer here to the right, actually contains the ink-stained compartments, which would have held the inkwell and the little shaker that would hold sand to dry the ink. And now, when you close the desk, again, let's refrain from opening and closing the 230-year-old desk too much when they're being finicky. But nevertheless, you could lock this lock here, but I wouldn't recommend doing it, not because all of the other locks don't work, they work well, it's just this one's particularly long, and the amount of force and the moving parts that it has leads me to suspect that it is the one lock on this piece that could really malfunction at the most inopportune moment, perhaps locking your desk forever. That's always something to consider about these period pieces. Is a lot of times the locks work, but when they don't and when they jam, it's really a disaster. So anyway, with all of that being said, I hope that you've enjoyed taking a closer look at this interesting period piece from Paris from the 1790s. And I'll add that this rare brass-adorned variant of the Louis XVI style happens to really resonate with us in American history because it's the exact peculiar style that was in vogue during the 2 years that 5th President James Monroe was serving as ambassador to France from 1794 to 1796, and so he happened to bring back some furniture from this excursion, from this diplomatic mission, and it happened to be in this rare style. Now, Monroe famously had a standing secretary, not the cylindrical desk that we have here, and he had a few other pieces, but his standing secretary in the identical style and period as this desk is supposedly the drafting board for the Monroe Doctrine, this famous piece of legislation that sort of dominates American foreign policy thinking ever since it was written. But anyway, the desk is in the James Monroe Museum, and it so impressed First Lady Lou Hoover when she saw it that she had a copy of it made for herself when she was in the White House, now almost a century ago. So anyway, if you like the videos, please subscribe to the channel. That would be much appreciated and very helpful in continuing this endeavor of creating an online period furniture library for the most compelling pieces that I encounter. Thank you.